Hi, this is a topic which I think is kind of obvious to most people, but maybe I can give some different perspective. And it's first about the educational establishment in general, and secondly, it's about methods of learning efficiently. So, about the educational establishment, hopefully most people realize that the educational establishment, just like other big institutions in our society, it's not really set up to help the individual. It's more set up to help society, or the people in charge of society at least. It should be pretty obvious to everybody that when you're going through school, especially the mandatory parts of school where there's no incentive for them to really teach you much of anything because you're forced to be there, you're basically being taught to be a good worker. You're being taught to obey orders, listen to authority, not question too much. Never once are you given a self-improvement book like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Think and Grow Rich, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World, How to Win Friends and Influence People. If the educational establishment cared about you, they would let you read that kind of stuff or force you to read that kind of stuff. They don't teach you anything that's of real value in life. You don't learn anything about diet, healthy food. You don't learn anything about saving money effectively, obtaining inexpensive housing, social skills. We don't teach any of that stuff. We teach obey orders and do meaningless tasks. Very similar to the military, by the way. This is what the military uses. It forces you to do kind of a inefficient, foolish task so that you will stop questioning it after a while. And much like the military, the educational system uses a lot of the same tricks. It makes you think that you're elite. I don't want to belabor this too much. There are a lot of people that talk about it in much greater detail and do a better job explaining it than me. The real question, though, is what are you going to do about this? Like anything else, there are advantages and disadvantages to following various paths. There's no way you can make a blanket statement that each individual should follow a certain path. But an exploitive system will generally not try to make you aware of the disadvantages of following that system. So it's really up to you to talk to people who have followed different paths, to understand your own abilities, and to know what works best for you. Your teachers have the best of intentions for you generally, but they're part of the system too. It's your responsibility to learn about different paths outside of the educational establishment. And if you don't take that responsibility for yourself, then don't be surprised if other institutions exploit you to varying degrees. That's just the way the universe operates. You're ultimately responsible for yourself. There is so much opportunity to learn today with the internet, and even in the old days with public libraries. We live in a unique time in history. You can talk to so many people who have followed so many different paths. You don't need to get caught up in one particular path. And even if you do decide that I'm going to have to go along with the establishment on certain things, you can at least keep an open mind and look for opportunities to change and modify a path. Most successful people do not simply follow what they're told all of the time. At some point, if you're going to excel, you have to step outside the norms. Moxie Marlinspike had a great quote recently. He said, if you're considering a certain path or career, look at someone who's 60 years old who followed that path and see whether they seem happy. We're always taught to ask, what do you want to do when you grow up? What job do you want to have when you grow up? Nobody asks, what life do I want to have when I grow up? And if we started from the perspective of exactly how do I want to live? Do I want to have a lot of free time? Do I want to be able to travel? Do I want to learn? What are my general goals in life? Instead of asking, what career should I have in life? People would probably make different choices. We really limit ourselves by thinking only about what career we're going to have in the future instead of what life we're going to have in the future. And since it's kind of related, and I don't want to only make a video talking about general problems in the educational system, here are some useful ways to learn about any topic, in my opinion. Number one, always seek cultural and historical perspective. Most people only take the perspective of their immediate culture and their immediate time, and then you've only got one data point. You've got a much broader perspective and much more realistic perspective if you look at how other cultures view a certain topic and if you look from a historical perspective. So that's one of the things I always do in the beginning. You notice in a lot of my videos, I always talk about historical perspective first. It gives you a much broader understanding of anything. Number two, make it a habit to challenge your beliefs. Most people do the opposite. They seek out similar-minded people and they try to comfort themselves that their beliefs are correct. If you're ever upset at something someone says, really pay attention to that. As I've said in a video years ago, anger generally represents denial. I try to always hone in on if an idea upsets me in some way, I know there's something I'm blocking out there. Always challenge your beliefs, especially other belief systems that upset you or make you feel uncomfortable. Really hone in on that and try to find out what truth you're denying yourself. Number 3, surround yourself with other people who are interested in the topic you want to learn about. You can learn in an exponential fashion through conversation because you can hone in on specific topics, whereas when you learn by reading, you're learning in a more linear fashion. I'm not saying you have to ditch your friends and surround yourself with new people, but there are always opportunities to create networks of friends who are interested in certain topics, or acquaintances who are interested in certain topics, especially with forums nowadays online. You can be in touch with incredibly knowledgeable people on very specific topics. And before, understand the difference in practice versus study. This is the mistake that so many so-called intellectuals make. They think that because they've studied something in theory, they're going to understand it. You learn in an entirely different way when you practice something, obviously. And yet there are just countless people out there theorizing about politics who have never worked in government or never done anything in local politics. You'll learn more in one day working in a homeowners association than you'll learn in a lifetime of theorizing about politics. This is the case in every field, and so many people make the mistake of only studying and never practicing. You're really going to learn more efficiently through practice. There's a place for theory. Both have value, but ultimately you should be spending most of your time practicing if you really want to learn something. Just like an athlete is never really going to excel if he only focuses on the physical and not the mental, I believe that you never really reach your true potential if you only focus on the mechanical functions of the brain, like processing speed and memory. A lot of people just focus on how much they have memorized and don't focus on consciousness-based functions like inspiration or creativity. And there are ways to improve those functions which are different than the ways of improving memory. Religious systems, for example, go into a lot of detail about improving your state of consciousness, and other things can be done like diet. But that's a big part of understanding things, I believe, is improving your state of consciousness, not just focusing on the mechanical functions like memory, as so many people unfortunately focus all of their effort on. Number 6, in any field, people never really seem to make breakthroughs unless they try very hard to push themselves outside of their comfort zone. And this is a big problem with a lot of people who are learning. They only try to learn about things that they feel comfortable with to begin with. If you don't push yourself beyond your current knowledge and become insecure and look like an idiot, you're not going to learn much. You're not going to make breakthroughs. And far too many intellectuals, again, only learn about what they feel comfortable with. And lastly, a really common theme in many of my videos, I can't stress enough the importance of diet. Athletes recognize that it's important to eat a certain diet if you're going to excel athletically. Very few people seem to realize the enormous impact that diet has on your state of consciousness and your ability to think well. I could talk for hours about this topic, but unfortunately most Americans don't have a good diet, and it's not just a lack of nutrition, but it's also a lot of neurotoxins in the diet that people are unaware of. Really study that topic, I think, if you want your brain to operate optimally and even your state of consciousness to operate optimally. You need to have an optimal diet, and almost no one does. That's it. Sorry if it sounded preachy. I make these videos because I hope that some people can avoid, through my experience, making some of the mistakes that I've made. If you disagree with anything I've said, leave a comment below and I will respond.